Poverty and the Education Achievement Gap, an analysis of the dilemma of our time. Education is a great equalizer in our global position. Education offers opportunities for citizens regardless of their social background. That's why improving educational outcomes for children growing up in poverty is now recognized as an urgent national priority for every country. For most people, when they think about education, they think about school districts or authorities with a lot of influential people who are well connected to lobby for high quality schools. These schools are filled with experienced teachers and state-of-the-art technology. They don't picture children growing up in a high-stricken poverty neighborhood or communities who attend schools filled with inexperienced teachers and crumbling facilities. Oftentimes, these buildings are unsafe. The reality is that this place of learning will be the first students see when they come in the mornings, and it will be the last thing they see before they go home. This video presentation explains why students who experience poverty are at a disadvantage when it comes on to education. It explains the gap and the impact of this gap on these students as they become adults, and some of the solutions that need to be explored in order to reduce the gap between the rich and those students who are experiencing poverty. Before you watch this video further, please remember to subscribe if you have not done so and share the video. Let's explore why education is so important for poor students. Based on research, a child's chance of growing up in poverty is heavily correlated with their parents' educational level. The reality is that parents who lack a high school education will have a higher risk of falling below the poverty line as adults. Therefore, enhancing educational outcomes for poor students can have a powerful impact on reducing poverty. There are many reasons why education is so important for poor students. First, education is a great way to lift people out of poverty. For example, a person with a high school diploma or someone who stayed in formal education up to the ages of 16 or 17 will increase their annual earnings when compared to people who have dropped out of school or did not attend school at all. Education can lead to enhanced opportunities for children in poverty, which will afford these students productivity in their adult lives. Now let's explore the gap between the rich and the poor students. According to one report, it would take over 100 years for some countries to close the gap they have between the developed countries. And that is a travesty. And in order for this gap to be closed, they must give attention to the 26 different indicators outlined by UNICEF that needs attention in these countries. Now let me also state that the gap as it relates to the education gap does not only exist in countries that are underdeveloped. It happens also in first world countries. Now let us explore. The impact of poverty on education is a vicious cycle. It leads to the lack of education. It leads to reduced opportunities, low income, and of course, when you look at that also, it leads to poor health outcomes and more dependency on social services. There are two big consequences of the growing educational gap between the rich and the poor students. First, the cycle of intergenerational poverty persists. Many poor students are growing up and going into a school environment where learning is difficult because of social and economic problems. Students growing up in poverty are likely to be taught by inexperienced teachers who are less likely to be promoted to a higher level assignment. These schools are less likely to be state-of-the-art technology. All of these factors combined and others make learning more difficult for poor students. As a result, they are less likely to go to college and more likely to fall into poverty as adults. The other consequence of this growing gap is that the rich is getting richer while the poor is getting poorer. The rich are becoming more educated while the poor are becoming less educated. This creates a society for which it is harder for poor people to break out of poverty and go ahead. Educators, policymakers, and researchers are already aware of what needs to take place. Clearly, the growing educational gap between the rich and the poor student is a problem that needs to be solved. One solution is to improve teaching in the lowest quality schools. This could be done by raising standards of teacher training. It could also be accomplished by paying higher salaries to teachers who work in low-income schools. Another solution is to improve the quality of schools serving low-income areas. This could be done by improving funding for schools in these areas and not to penalize these schools for not reaching standards. It could also be accomplished by encouraging schools in poor areas to use their funding effectively. As a matter of fact, ensure they have the support to spend. Another solution could be to improve college access and completion rates among low-income students. This could be accomplished by making tuition at public universities free. It could also be done by making it easier for low-income students to get financial aid so they can attend college without taking in huge loans, which again can affect them in their adult lives. It could be done by increasing the number of scholarships available for low-income students. The reality is that we can do this, but it must take a change in policy, a change in mind, and a change in how we approach closing this gap. We cannot continue to give lip service, but we must take action if we are truly about an inclusive process and creating equal opportunities for our students. The gap between the rich and the poor students is one of the most important issues facing education in our world today. How we solve this problem will determine if we're all about equal opportunities or maintaining a system that recreates inequality. If we choose to close the gap between the rich and poor students, we will need to improve the quality of education in low-income areas, provide more funding for poor schools, and make college more accessible for poor students. And of course, increase the number of scholarships that poor students will get. Thanks for watching and remember to subscribe. That's all for now.